Hi everyone. This brief video is to overview the Entering the Conversation project and the final keystone assignment in the project, the Entering the Conversation argument. So this video is just about assignments in this class. So I want to start with an overview of the project. This is in our syllabus, of course. It's a little bit deep in our syllabus, but if you haven't checked it out yet, here we are. The Entering the Conversation argument project itself is 250 points total. This is a 1,000 point course, so that's exactly 25% of your course grade. What you might notice first off, if you've looked at this, is that there are quite a few assignments. I just want to assure you that although this looks like maybe a lot of assignments, they are a lot of small, scaffolded, low-stakes writing assignments. In other words, if you do these assignments progressively, about one a week, right? They build upon one another, and we can use the work we've done through all of these assignments to help us complete this final Entering the Conversation argument, which worth 100 points is a higher stakes, more formal piece of writing. So we've already actually completed the first step here by identifying and analyzing our discourse community. And this week we are focusing on entering the conversation proposal. In short, we're going to try to find some sort of conflict, tension, ask some good research questions, and ultimately come up with something interesting, good to say to enter this conversation that our discourse community is having. Then we're going to write a draft. We're going to try it out. We're going to try to create our argument. Then we'll do peer review. One thing I just want to point out very briefly is the peer review is worth 50 points, which among all these other lower stakes writing assignments is quite a lot. The thing that should suggest to you is we put a lot of value on peer review. And unlike perhaps in other classes, I just want you to know we'll spend time learning what good peer review is. We'll spend time learning how to give good peer review. And so then when it comes time for you to give peer review, it's worth 50 points, and I'm going to grade it based on how good it is. So it's just a warning. It's not like maybe other peer review that you've done where you just do it and you get the grade. Okay, then we move on to the revision plan, in which we take the feedback we've gotten from your peers and from me, and we come up with some sort of a plan how we're going to incorporate or use the good peer feedback we've gotten. Then we enact that plan, and we complete almost complete the project with this formal Entering the Conversation argument. We'll look at that assignment in more detail later in this video. And there is a 25-point reflection memo at the end of this project in which we are going to reflect on what we did, what we learned, how we met course learning outcomes, or how we didn't. We'll get used to doing this throughout the term because that's actually one of the learning outcomes for this course is to understand what we know what we know. Metacognition, we'll talk about it, but we want to reflect on what we know how to do, and because that's the first step in being able to transfer what we learned in this course to other writing situations, which is a key outcome for this course. Okay, so this project, in brief, is a multiple-part project culminating in a clear, organized, well-researched, well-argued, well-supported argument. Writers will focus on inventing good research questions and ultimately finding a specific, debatable thesis. I should probably add finding and supporting through good argumentation about any issue or conflict concerning the discourse community. The audience are members of the discourse community or outsiders who are interested in issues and conflicts addressed. Here, I just want to draw a distinction between this project, our first entering the conversation argument, and our second project, the discourse community report. Given what I've put in bold here, what the point I want to make, the points I want to make are: one, we are sticking with the same discourse community throughout the entire term, throughout these two projects. So, point one, the discourse community is going to remain the same. However, what we write about within that discourse community will change. So, for the entering the conversation argument, we can write about any issue, conflict, tension, disagreement, gap in knowledge, all of those things that Green and our other readings have suggested we look for. We can write about anything that's unsettled within our discourse community. So for instance, an example from a past student is he had chosen the competitive bodybuilding discourse community, a specific one, right? One with which achieved their goals through writing. And he discovered that there was a lot of tension and disagreement surrounding the testing for the use of performance-enhancing drugs. So ultimately, for this project, he asked some good research questions, and he composed a thesis that basically suggested that that these competitions should stop testing for and excluding bodybuilders for performance-enhancing drugs. It was a good thesis because it was narrow, it was specific, and it took risks. It was kind of something that nobody had suggested before, and he supported it with good reasons. Okay, so that's the kind of thing we can write about in entering the conversation argument. Any issue that concerns our discourse community. When we move on to the discourse community report, we will have to focus. We're going to be doing the same things, right? We're going to invent good research, find a specific debatable thesis. But in this report, it has to be, in our second project here, it has to be about how the discourse community uses writing, rhetoric, language literacy, these ideas of discourse. We'll talk more about ideas of inclusion and exclusion, lexis, genre. It has to be about how our discourse community uses these ideas about writing. This is how we're going to meet a pretty prominent learning outcome in this course that asks us to contribute to the conversation about rhetoric, language literacy, writing studies, so on and so forth. So in this discourse community report, we must focus in some way on how our discourse community uses language. So to extend the previous example I had given you, the student who had chosen the professional bodybuilding community, for this project, he kind of extended, right? He kind of extended his research from the last project, and he said, okay, I have to focus on language here, and he did an analysis of the lexis that the discourse community, the bodybuilding discourse community, used surrounding PEDs. In short, he kind of said, I'm going to examine the specialized language that this discourse community uses about performance-enhancing drugs, and ultimately I'm going to argue that through analyzing this specialized vocabulary, we can see the attitudes are sort of changing from pejorative to more positive around performance-enhancing drugs. So I think hopefully that one example gives you some sort of an idea of what it looks like to keep the same discourse community, but to focus, to change the focus about, to change the issue from anything that interests our discourse community to specifically something about how our discourse community uses writing.